Hey YouTube, what is good? So this week I'll be showing you layers and how they work in Capture One. So let's roll that intro and let's just dive straight into it. So when I open up Capture One, you can see images from last week's shoot during our shoot event. I will show you how to give some vibe on these images by just using layers and Capture One in general. So no Photoshop, just Capture One, which is a raw converter, and it lets you convert your RAWs straight into PSD, STIFs, JPEGs, any file format you would desire. So if we jump into Capture One, you can see this image shot last week with Mademoiselle Inked. I will pop up the little Instagram tag here. And this is the original image straight out of the camera. So if I go to the settings, you can see nothing has been done. The settings are on our, let me move this a little bit up. So the settings are on my left side in this part. There's everything you can adjust. It's the same like the sliders you have in Lightroom on your right side. Now, Capture One also works layer based. That means you can use Capture One with layer stacks where you continually build the entire scene up. So you don't stop with just one adjustment. You can slowly build things up. So when I had this, I played around with it and this was the final effect I came to. As you can see on the left side, there are only 4 adjustment layers. So let's start playing around with it. Let's show you how you can do it or what your possibilities are. So first things first, I'm using again a drawing tablet. So first things first, if I open up this image, the first layer you will see is background. Now, if you don't see the layer panel, what you can do is go to Window, Create Floating Tool, and then in here, somewhere you should have layers, and then you can just drag this box into your settings on the left side. If you want to remove this, just tab on the 3 little dots and just hit Remove Tool. Easy as that. Now, we got this image. And when we have this image, the first things we want to do is do the basic things. So make sure that the lighting is okay, the white balance is okay, contrast, shadows, highlights, all those things. So first things first, let me see, because my mic is totally in the way. I'm going to angle it a little bit more down. So first things first, I'm going to lift the exposure a bit and play around with brightness so that I have a little bit more detail in the image in general. Once that's done, I can play around with the white balance. I can go for a really warm vibe, or I could go for a really cold vibe. Now this is too much, but like somewhere around here should. I'm the guy who goes for the warm tone, so I will go into the yellows and into the magentas. So the tinting I will do a little bit more purplish. There we go. So it's just a matter of eyeballing the vibe you want to go for. So contrast I want to reduce a bit, because if we would export this image out into Photoshop, the last thing you want is an image with a lot of contrast in it. So you want to reduce it so you have less work in post-production. Then, while putting contrast in it now, contrast is one of the final stages you will put into an image. So let's go to the high dynamic range. Highlights, we will pop them up so they pop a little bit more. Shadows we will lift as well a little bit, the whites as well and the blacks as well. So in general, lift everything, in this case for this specific image, to the right. So that's our base layer, which is the background layer. So let's just scroll back up. And now this tool, this box, the layer box, you can create an extra layer by just hitting the plus icon. So if you hit the plus icon, you can do adjustments on this layer and in a way that it builds up. It's the same like Photoshop. So when I draw now, this is the symbol, the icon for drawing. So when I draw, you won't see anything. When I let go of the drawing, you don't see anything. You don't know where you've painted. So if you press the shortcut key M on your keyboard, so the M from Mama, you can see where you have painted. By hitting it on and off, you can enable and disable it. Now, if you want to remove something from the layer mask, you just hit this little, make sure that the current layer you're working on and the one you want to remove is selected, and just tap on the minus icon and it will be gone. So let's do this again. Let's go with plus. Let's paint. Let's go for, we want more brightness in the face. So what I will be doing is lifting up the exposure and then just take the brush and then just paint over the face. Now, it's too bright, and a good thing about this is if it's too bright with layers, you can play around with the opacity of the layer. So you can go like 36% something. Now, another way is to just reduce the slider you have lifted. That's also a possibility. So you can combine opacity together with just reducing this part in the image. Somewhere around there should be fine. Now, another thing what we can do is adjust the colors in general. So we want, this orange is a little bit too bright, so we want to adjust that specific orange and nothing else. A way to do that is to create a good habit is to rename the layer. So let's call this, let's remove this, brightening face. Then we know later on that that was the layer specific for the face. I'm not gonna do this on this one, so I'm gonna call this layer just blue toning, because then I know I added blue in the image, on the entire image. And now again, if it's too much, play around with the opacity and you can reduce and emphasize that layer. So that's another step. Another step is just a new layer, a new adjustment layer. This time I will be calling it orange. And I will be going to the colors tab, which are these 3 circles. And in here you have, let's see where it is. You have the color editor. Again, if you don't see this, just go to Window, Create Floating Tool, and just select Color Editor. Should be, yeah, there it is. So then you pop it open in a separate Floating Tool tab. So if I go to Advanced, I tap on this eyedropper and I select the orange I want to adjust. We can now play around with the smoothness, which tells you how much you want to go off the initial color you sampled. So if I go to smoothness, you can see that this will adjust these colors and it will feather out more into the green and more into the reddish orange vibes. So that depends if you adjust the layer mask. If you want it real defined, you make the smoothness go left. If you want it really soft, you make the smoothness go to the right. Now, if we change the hue, you can immediately tell that we are changing some things. The saturation, we want it less or more saturated. Let's go somewhere there. Now, again, we don't see anything. And why don't we see anything? Because our layer mask is still selecting nothing. So we will be taking a brush and we will be painting over the orange vibes. And as you can tell now, you can see the changes happening. So that's something you have to watch out for. Make sure that you are painting on a mask or that you have first inverted the layer instead of just starting painting, because now you can see that some funky things are happening. So I will be resetting this again, reset it, and then do this whole process again. Tap on the eyedropper, tap on the oranges, go down, play around with the hue. A little bit more yellow, a little bit less saturation. So now you can see that's the area we are adjusting. If you want it to be more, you can paint on the layer mask if needed. So let's adjust it the way we want it. Red, green, nothing really fancy in there. Another way we can do is just play around with the, but there's not really any color we like. So we're gonna just drop this out. So reset it. And let's compare it with the image I had. So it was a lot darker. So the oranges we forget, and how to remove this layer, we just tap this little minus icon and then it's gone. There is still an undo, so if you hit Ctrl or Command Z on the PC or Mac, you can still undo that last step. But once you normally hit minus, it's gone forever. So let's go back to the entire image. You can also do some dodging and burning with this. That's a quicker way. So you go to plus, you name this one dodge. We make another one, we make this one burn. So burning and dodging, one of the layers makes, the dodging makes everything brighter, the burn makes everything darker. So if we take the dodge, and we don't forget to invert the layer mask, so right click, invert mask, right click, invert mask. But if we do the changes now, so if we go to the dodging, and I click here, and I enhance the exposure, you see the entire image is adjusted. We don't want the entire image to be adjusted. We don't want a specific part of the image to be brighter. So let's undo this, and let's undo the invert mask. And let's do the same with the burn. So invert mask again. So the burn will be darker, the dodge will be brighter. And now we just take a normal brush and we just start painting. So if you want to change the size of the brush, you just right click and then all the adjustment brush settings pop up. Here you can adjust it. I like to play around with flow because then when I paint, I can slowly build it up. So I'm giving some depth into the entire image. There we go. I can do the same now with the burn layer. And don't forget, if you want to see the layer mask you're actually painting on, you just hit the keyboard shortcut M and it will pop up in red. There we go. And now this is too much. You can immediately tell it's too much. So we will reduce the opacity. And it's the same with the dodging. We will reduce the opacity so that everything still looks natural and it doesn't look too crazy. Now, if we uncheck these two, you can see that you create some depth in the image or in the curtains behind her. So that's something, yeah, that's layers in general. So you can slowly build it up. Play around with the order of the layers. So you can drag this one down now. You can drag the blue down so that the blue toning is still on top of it, because we want to do adjustments in brightness and darkness before we start toning an image. So this is the one I did before. So let me show you how it's done. So this one was just painting a little bit magenta orange on the curtains because it was basically there. Then this one was the dodging layer or the burning layer. It was the burning layer. This one was the dodge layer. And then this one is just brightening up the face. So in general, let me show you the original one, new variant. So let me show you them next to each other. So left one is the one with layer adjustments, right one is the one straight out of the camera. So you can immediately tell the difference between the two. Now, the reason we do this in Capture One and we don't do this in Photoshop, for instance, is because we are working with a raw file. And a raw file means you only have zeros and ones. So if you brighten up the shadows, you will have a lot more detail in this. The same with colors. If you pop a color really hard, make it more saturated, you will have less artifacts going on than doing it in Photoshop with a curves adjustment layer or anything else. So play around with it. Play around with layers in general. Try to mix them up. Keep in mind that color has to be the final adjustment before the darkening and the brightening, so the dodging and burning. If you keep that in mind, everything should be fine. And now, even if you have done these layer stacks, you can still export this totally out into Photoshop and do your further adjustments. The only thing to keep in mind is once you have done the color adjustments and exporting it into Photoshop, when you start playing around with it, make sure that you won't have any color shifts. That's something really important. So that's it for this week. Again, if you compare both images, the left one and the right one, you can immediately tell the difference by just putting like an extra 5 or 10 minutes up front in Capture One before starting to edit the final image. So that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and then I'll see you next week. Ciao, ciao.